I took my hat off too, so. That's about as professional as I get.
All right.
I feel safe and seen. I'm good with it.
There you go. I chose the right crew. Listen, I went out. I called myself Nick Fury because he had to go find all the Avengers, and that's my job. Okay, I've owned it. Hello, Miss Fleshman.
Hello, Miss Hollins. How are you?
I'm great. I've been giving your racism talk to all the people. 400 years of racism history for the past 2 weeks. It's been great.
And we are live, y'all. We got about 100 people have joined already.
Look at that.
Yay!
Exciting.
Welcome, everybody.
Welcome to the community. Wow.
Very cool to see everyone's joining.
Look at this.
We'd love to hear from you. I'm going to share my screen. Oh, jump this up. Tom was just talking about how we share embarrassing things when we don't have slide decks up. Welcome to Combating Racism and Cultivating Belonging in the Workplace. As you join, would love if you chatted in. Where are you calling in from today? And what's something you're hoping to take away from this panel discussion with our amazing crew?
Don't be shy. Yes. Shout out to Portland, Oregon. Thank you, Dustin. Ooh, Vancouver, Washington, Jersey, Seattle. Oh, all the places. Chicago, shout out to the Midwest. Oh, I love it. Oh, this makes me so happy. Kansas City, Charlotte, all the people.
San Jose, hell yeah.
Oh, Chicago twice. Boom.
Vancouver.
Liverpool, UK. Oh, we are really rolling. And look at this. I love it. Mountain View.
Mountain View. I live there.
What else we got? What else we got? What am I missing, Sam? We got Bmore, Baltimore.
We got my hometown represented. We got Teaneck, New Jersey, the most important place in the country. Yeah.
Great Falls, Montana. I saw you. Harrisonburg.
Oh, I see you, St. Louis. I see you, family. Family.
Inglewood, California, all day. Cambridge, Massachusetts. I see you.
I love,
I love this representation. Now tell us, now that we know where you all are coming from, what are you all hoping to take away from the discussion today? Yes. Reconciling important DEI anti-racist work with companies still relying on volunteer ERGs. That is my forte. Yes. Would love to hear how we can best address these issues, putting even more burden or putting even more of a burden on people of color. I understand. Diversity and racism in and out of the workplace. What are you seeing, Sam? Anything that stands out to you, any of the panelists?
Yeah, I love some of this. How do we create enough trust? Trust seems to be a buzzword here, the relationship between trust and anti-racism. Wisdom and encouragement. Yeah.
Action items. Yes, action. Moving from the conversation to the tangible. That's what we're about.
Real
inspiration.
Commitment.
Shout out Louisville, Kentucky as well.
How to push leadership into action.
Yep. Yes. Leadership into action. That's what we need. Well, we're giving everyone some time to join, and Sam is going to kick us off in just a few moments, but we're happy to hear from everyone today. We're so excited that you're joining us. We'll give a little more context and color about the conversation, and then we're going to hop right in and get to learn more about our panelists. So just a few more moments, and then Sam, feel free to kick it off.
Sounds great. Yeah, let's give people one more minute, see some more folks joining. About 200 people.
How to help white folks break through defensiveness and stop expecting POC to hold their hands and or apologize for holding them to account.
Message and a word.
Well,
Yes,
Karen, it's almost like that's your thing.
I hope you all can sense the joy. Now, we understand the seriousness of the conversation, which is why we've curated this community of folks to talk through it with you. It is not easy, but it is necessary. And I'm glad that we're doing this today with the support and the leadership of the Hone brand. So I'm excited to be here with you all.
Beautiful. Well, thanks, Don, for getting us started. Why don't we kick this off? Appreciate you all joining and being on time, and love seeing everyone post in the chat. Continue to do that throughout. Really, the purpose of today is to engage in a live interactive discussion where we hear from our expert panel, but also hear from you and cater to your concerns and interests. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'll jump into Hone. I'm actually going to stop share while I do that so you can see our panel. I'm Sam. I head up Hone's learning experience. I'm very excited to be here today. I come from a place of privilege and middle income background, place of power as a white man. I was opened up to these types of conversations nearly 12 years ago when I was an educator in middle schools in Washington, D.C., predominantly full of Black students, and began to realize how inequitable our education system is and how systematic racism is. And it was a real eye-opener to me, and have been on a path of learning since. And that is where I will be coming from in this conversation. So enough about me. What we are here to do today is to amplify the voices of folks who have made this their life's work. And really that fits in the mission of what Hone is all about. So let me just share that quickly, and then we'll jump into the panel. At Hone, our mission is to democratize access to the world's most impactful learning experiences. And what that looks like in its core message is that we make it incredibly easy and accessible for learners and participants around the world to join live discussions and trainings that are led by diverse experts across leadership and management training. And there's really three pillars to what Hone does. The first is live virtual classes with 10 to 20 folks, typically, engaging, interactive, led by an expert facilitator and coach on your schedule. We've heard before Hone described as the Peloton of live training. So you join in the morning, the afternoon, Monday through Friday, finding courses that you want to take and that you can join on your schedule. And finally, real impact and real results. And we've trained thousands of managers and leaders and individual contributors over the past few years. Over 90% show a lasting and significant impact on their leadership style after 30 days of going through programs, and that's sustainable over time. So that's a bit about Hone. Here are some of our partners across diverse industries, and so looking forward to this conversation today. I'll get off stop share. Let me just introduce a friend and a colleague, Dominique Hollins, who is just an incredibly brilliant, passionate educator. It's been so much fun to work with you, Dom, on this. We come from different backgrounds, perspectives, and we don't always agree, but it's been so fun to collaborate and make this stronger as a result. So thank you for all the work you do, and to our brilliant panel. Looking forward to this conversation. And I will step off, and Dom, take it away.
First and foremost, thank you, Sam, for that amazing introduction. Our partnership is why today was possible. As you know, I've been very intentional about letting people see us work together. They need to know it's possible and what magic can come out of that. Can you confirm that you can actually see my slide? I've had some Zoom challenges. Excellent. So thank you to the community, and thank you all for joining us. Irene, thank you so much for confirming. Again, my name is Dominique Hollins. Not only am I a Hone coach, helping to facilitate conversations like this and others, but I'm also the founder of We360, founder and CEO, 360 degrees of workplace equity. My objective is to ensure that we're connecting the dots of diversity and inclusion and not just doing performative D&I work that leads essentially to nowhere. We're looking for sustainability. I'm also the co-founder of Our Collective, which brings together our Black and Latinx employee resource groups. Right now, they are overwhelmed by trying to service their companies when they should be trying to make sure that they are made whole. And so we're trying to make sure that they have the resources to ensure that they can move forward. And then my background professionally is I sit in the business. I do not have an HR background, which gives me a very unique value proposition. My goal is to help you achieve quarter-over-quarter metrics and the typical business goals you would achieve through a DEI lens to ensure that it's integral to your foundation. What brings me here today is the context of racism and how it has permeated not only our entire American lives, but how it has become very present in corporate America. I brought voices today that will help us have that conversation. What is it? What does it mean to be racist? What is racism? How do we become anti-racist? And once we can get through that, then we can talk about belonging. until you address the hardships we're trying to dismantle, you can never truly get to the progress we seek. So without further ado, this image, what I'll show you is in 2016, when an election took place, a lot of folks were shook. And so we marched under the guise of MLK because he believed that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It may not be you today, but it could be you tomorrow. So it is our responsibility to make sure that the work we're doing today is for the employees, the colleagues, the children, and the generation behind us. And in that spirit, let's meet our wonderful panel. Oh, before we do that, why are we here today? 2020 started with a pandemic. It progressed to 15% unemployment. It has been exacerbated by civil and social unrest due to police fatality. I won't call it brutality because that assumes someone lived, and there are a lot of people who have passed away. This is culminated based on the murder of George Floyd and the impact, the ripple effect that it has had, not only in your organizations, but in your communities, in your neighborhoods, across the US and across the world, with Germany being one of the largest show of protests. That's why we're here today. And I want us to make sure we center that. And our panelists are going to help us process that so that you can be an ally and advocate in your workplace towards a collective and equitable future for all of us. In order for us to do this successfully, here are the rules for engagement today, the agreements. To be present, to be focused on the conversation, to listen to everyone. That allows you to open yourself up to something you hadn't thought before and for someone to potentially be receptive to what you have to say. Actively participate. Please give your thoughts. You might be saying something somebody else wants to say, but maybe they need a little encouragement. Put your questions in the chat box. I ask that you write them down first. We might answer them throughout the conversation. And if we don't, pop it in the chat box and then we'll hope to make sure that you get them answered. And last but not least, this is a safe space. We will make it safe for you, and we ask that you do the same for everyone else in our community, okay? And now, my panelists. I'm gonna pounce around and ask them individually to introduce themselves. I hand curated these panelists because in their respective skills and their respective subject areas of expertise, I am learning from them the way that I want you to learn from them today. I could not do this on my own. And so what I want to do to kick us off, I'm going to kick us off with Lily Zheng and allow them to tell us who you are, why you do what you do, and what you expect to get out of today. And then I'm going to rotate and choose who I want to speak next. We're going to close it out with Lexi Butler. But Lily, would you like to kick it off for us?
Sure thing. I'm surprised that I'm first because with a last name that starts with Z, I'm usually last. So I am surprised.
I'm being inclusive.
You are. So Lily Zheng, I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I'm based in the SF Bay Area, and I am a DE&I consultant. I work solo. I've been doing this work for about 5 or so years in the Bay, but also around the world, across the country. And I feel like, actually, no, what was the second question? It was who we are and then what we do, right?
Why you do, yeah. Why do you do what you do, and what do you hope for people to learn today? Yep.
Right. So I do what I do, which is make systemic change, which is help companies really fix their culture, their structure, their policies, their practices to make performative D&I a thing of the past. I do this because I deeply care about getting shit done. I deeply care about fixing the world around us. And, you know, I don't have any patience for companies that say one thing and do another. So, you know, my passion is in helping folks who want to get it right, actually get it right. And I forgot the last question again.
No worries. What do you want people to take away from what we're sharing today? What do you want them to take away?
So actionable tips is my whole thing. So I want people to walk away with things that they can do literally today, literally tomorrow to make a difference, things that they can feel like they can own. And I don't want people to make any excuses for not doing those things, right? So I'm gonna give them to you and you're gonna do them, or you're gonna have to deal with the fact that you're not doing them and feel bad about it until you do it.
And that's why I kicked it off with Lily. Thank you for that fire and that energy. I share your energy. And now I'm going to pivot to Jared. Jared, would you like to take it away?
Thank you so much, Dom. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Jared Karol. I'm coming to you live from Oakland, California. And I do what I do because when I grew up in a very homogenous, very straight, very white, very cis environment, I didn't know what I was missing. My dad told me he was gay when I was 14. I finally told someone when I was 20, and I was a college athlete, and I was in that kind of culture of sports and drinking and partying and coolness. And I had no, actually, that's not true. I had a little bit of a clue because my dad was gay, but I didn't want to tell anyone. And so that opened me up once I did start telling people, not only in the LGBT community, but oh my gosh, all these other communities that I was missing out on relationships and opportunities and knowledge. And really what it comes down to is the humanity. So when my dad died of AIDS in 2000, I moved to San Francisco and I started teaching. And so even though I'm not a classroom teacher anymore, 20 years on, I'm still a teacher. And I'm trying to help elevate my own and others' humanity. So I really focus on the story. What is your story around racism or anti-racism? And I specifically work with white folks around that journey. So I'm hoping that people listening to this understand that, yes, as Lily said, it is, and Sam was saying, and you were saying, it is the system, and we have to fight the system, but the system is made up of all of us individuals. And if individuals aren't willing to do their work, then nothing's going to change.
And that there is why Jared has been invited to the barbecue, to the proverbial barbecue. And now we're going to pivot to, and thank you so much, Jared, for your story, because I know there are people in this room who can relate to your story, as Lily, as Karen, as Lexi, as myself, and I need them to see that diversity of life experience. So thank you so much. Karen, let's hear about what you hope to, who you are, why you do what you do, and what you're looking for the community to take away today.
Yes, thank you so much. And I see we already have questions going in the chat around the definition of cis, and there's a good one here. Cisgender is a term for people whose gender identity matches their sex assigned at birth. For example, someone who identifies as a woman and was assigned female at birth is a cisgender woman. So I am a cisgender woman. And sometimes we just use the word cis, C-I-S. Okay, so who am I? I'm Karen Fleshman. I'm a Gen X white woman named Karen. Sorry.
Some people may or may not know why that's important, Karen, so feel free to give them the quick spiel.
Yeah, well, you might want to Google hashtag Karen and see some of the memes and videos. And really, you know, I watch the TikTok videos a lot. My kids show them to me. In fact, my kids just created a TikTok account for me so I can start making, it's called the Common Sense Karen TikTok account. Basically, it is people who've been without power for a long time holding white women to account for our behavior. Not people who've been, but people who are marginalized in our society using the means at their disposal to hold white women to account. Why do I do what I do? Well, okay, I am a mentor, I am a attorney, I'm an activist, I'm an anti-racism educator, and I am a soccer mom. And basically, I am someone who really, really loves people. I love all people. I especially love young people. And I believe that the system of gendered racism that has been baked into every aspect of our country from the very origin of our country is going to get us all killed. And we have to get rid of this whole system of oppression. And that's what I've dedicated my life's work to. So the early part was in the immigrants' rights movement. And then I shifted focus to preparing young adults of color for work in tech, only to hear their stories about the harm that they were experiencing at the workplace. I was like, dang, I thought I was helping you, but I'm actually sending you into harm's way. So what can I do to change the workplace? Because the reason why I focus on the workplace is not because I'm a super fan of capitalism, but because I believe in work, and I believe all of us have tremendous gifts to give to the world, and we all deserve the opportunity to deliver those gifts, and the world deserves our brilliance, and that's how we're all going to get free. But the way work is currently designed is causing tremendous harm, and that's why I do what I do, to try and end that harm.
Thank you so much, Karen, and I look forward to hearing more of your story throughout our session. And last but certainly not least, the Malcolm X to my Dr. Martin Luther King, Lexi Butler never lets me forget my Blackness. And since we are both from the Midwest, she always makes sure I'm well read before I do things like that. So naturally, I had to end this section with Ms. Butler. Please take it away and let them know who you are.
Hi everyone, my name is Alexandria Butler, affectionately known as Lexi B. People ask me all the time, what do I do? And I say that my title is a freedom fighter. I am a freedom fighter since I was born, and I will die a freedom fighter. Under that contents of that title, you have things like I currently work at Twitter as a senior program manager for privacy. So I have worked at multiple tech companies, and where I come in from a 9-to-5 aspect, from a qualitative work aspect, is making sure that companies have an understanding of their ethical responsibility to how in which people use products. And I've done this at companies like Twitter, where I am now in privacy, Facebook, Airbnb, and NetApp. But then also under Freedom Fighter, I am the founder of Sister Circle Black Women in Tech, which is a 6,500+ organization that was founded 3 years ago, because I strongly believe, myself as a dark-skinned Black woman, when I started working in the tech industry, there were no Black people. There were some, and the majority of them were men. And then the few Black women that were there, they were much older than me, so in their 50s. Wonderful women who I still call my fairy godmothers today. But the point is that there are no safe spaces for Black women. So I founded this group in this organization to make sure that Black women can see themselves not only in tech in general, because we don't see ourselves every day, but also receive the mentorship and the support and the networking, and most importantly, the fellowship, because we are our own sheroes. And the unfortunate thing is that we do not see that on a daily basis. All of that culminates into the idea of I am a freedom fighter. And I think what I want people today to understand is that all of us are freedom fighters. You decide whether or not you are actually going to stand in that truth and do it. And so for all of you to figure out those actionable steps to actually freedom fight, if you have not started doing that wherever you are. Because what would this world look like if every person stood in their freedom fight and decided to use their layers of privilege to help other people? That actually brings down systemic racism. And I know today we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I do want people to think about that, is that you as an individual right now, wherever you are virtually around the world, what are you doing each day to knock down some type of racist behavior? How are you being a freedom fighter? And if we all do that collectively, racism would never exist, or will stop existing. Sorry, yes.
And so now you understand why we've chosen our panelists, and we're going to transition into some questions. Lexi, I couldn't have said it better myself. Alexandria, in this context, thank you all so much. And let's hop into some of the questions we're going to ask them to kick it off. And what we're gonna do, just so you don't feel like I'm like glossing over the speakers, I'm not the type of moderator that's gonna ask everybody to speak. That's not effective and it's not productive. I'm gonna ask a question, and based on the panelist experience, if they have a very potent or visceral story that they can tell that can resonate, that's the panelist that I encourage to speak up. And if it's not really your thing, no pressure. And then that way we can get to questions from the audience. And so let's take a look about what that is. So here's what we're gonna cover today. What do racism and anti-racism look like in the workplace? How are companies succeeding at anti-racism in the workplace, which I think is probably a stretch at this stage, but for those who are winning, happy to highlight them. How are companies failing at anti-racism in the workplace? And we're gonna be very honest about that, because we could probably point out a lot of examples. What steps can individuals and leaders take to cultivate anti-racism within their teams and organizations? How can you be that freedom fighter in the office. And then lastly is, how will you apply what you've learned today moving forward? I assure you we're not having this conversation for discussion's sake. We want you to have tangible takeaways that you can implement when you get off of this call today. So in order to do this constructively, not only did we define racism, we got about 18 definitions, but we whittled it down to 3. The Oxford version is that racism is a prejudice and discrimination. So there's so many people who want to use the word racism at a time when it doesn't apply. There is prejudice, there's discrimination or antagonism. Those are the first 3. Directed against a person or people on the basis of their membership for a particular group. So one, you're prejudiced right off top, and then you're prejudiced against the group by nature of it just being another group. And then that group is typically one that is marginalized. So it's 3 components. And I want you all to process that. You already have a discriminatory look. You have chosen a population to ostracize, and then that group is already marginalized. So it's easy to pick on them. That's part 1. Part 2, which is more nefarious. It is a doctrine or political program based on the assumption of racism and designed to execute its principles. So there is an agenda that is being upheld, and through the principle of racism is it carried out. These are the potent pieces we need you to acknowledge, because some people believe if I'm not calling you a certain name and if it's not explicit, then I'm not racist. And what we're telling you here is that it's so pervasive, you may not see. But let's take it another step deeper. Thank you to Ibram Kendi. His book right now is Spelling Out of the Water, How to Be Anti-Racist. I encourage all of you to join a book club, to purchase it, to start reading. He says that racist is not the worst word in the English language. If you ever watch somebody wince when they hear it as if they've just been significantly offended, it's not the worst word. It is not the equivalent of a slur. It is descriptive. It is describing an action or behavior. And the only way to undo racism is to consistently identify and describe it. We are doing what people are incredibly uncomfortable about. They don't even want to hear you talk about it, but we're going to talk about it all the time because it happens all the time. And once you describe it, then you dismantle it. And to dismantle is to take apart piece by piece the questions that you ask, the way you deliver the message, the inquiries behind the comments. That's what we're going to teach you today. And last but certainly not least is Audre Lorde, a Black lesbian woman, journalist, feminist who has been dissecting this for longer than many of us have paid attention to. In 1981, she spoke and she said that racism is the belief and the inherent superiority of one race over all others, and thereby the right to dominance. So with the 3 definitions we have provided, we see a social construct, we see discrimination against a certain group based on the fact that they're already small enough and probably doesn't have the power to fight back. We see that it is not a slur, but that in fact, it is something we need to call out and dismantle. And then we see it as intentional dominance. With those 3, that is the context with which we're going to have a poll question. Now, Sam, would you like to walk us through our poll question so we can get a pulse check on
Absolutely.
our...
Thanks, Dom. So I just shared it. You all should see it on your ends. And we're just curious, what has been your own experience with racism in the workplace? Dom just defined it in a number of different contexts, and we'd love to hear from all of you. So seeing folks pulling in, super interesting. We'll share the results in about a minute. Yeah, gives a good sense of who is in the room, and really appreciate the honesty and transparency here. So I'll just give another 10 seconds or so. Thanks for participating and engaging in this.
I'm very excited not only to see the outcome of the poll, but I'm very interested to see how our panelists are going to respond to embrace or counter any of those definitions as we answer some of these questions. So I'm very excited. And then Sam, what kind of results we got?
Do you see it up, Dom?
Yes. All right, so what has been your own experience with racism in the workplace? 48% of you say, I have never felt prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed against me in the workplace because of my race. We can make some implications as to why that may be the case. 35% of you say, I have occasionally felt prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed towards me and because of my race. And then 17% of you say, I have often felt prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism directed towards me because of my race. What these polls suggest is that we can make some assumptions that based on this data, our room reflects a couple of demographics, some of which who have not faced discrimination, which we could make some assumptions as to who that might be. But for the folks who are, I'm gonna assume it's people of color and underrepresented minorities who experience it all the time, which is why we're so aware of it. We never are allowed to forget. Thank you, Sam, for the poll.
One thing that I'd add to that briefly is 25% of people didn't respond to that poll. So we don't actually know if people of color were overrepresented in people who didn't respond because maybe they don't feel safe yet. So question mark, let's think about that.
It's also why we have data people on the call, because numbers don't lie and data is only as good as the people interpret it. Thank you. A couple of things we want to do today. We're going to get into the chat. If you hear something that just resonates at your core, we have added the handle for all of our speakers. Give them that recognition on Twitter or LinkedIn. There's probably somebody else who needs to hear it. And then feel free to put hashtag HONE or whatever that is. We want to make sure that our panelists get the visibility for the contribution that they're making today. And that being said, amongst our panelists, what does racism look like in the modern workplace? What does it feel like? And what does it sound like? And whoever's most passionate, take it away. Oh, now you all are being humble.
Oh, I have something. I got you. I was like, who's gonna? So I personally think that in the modern day workplace, especially in the past 15 years, because of the words like diversity and inclusion, we have all these companies that stand on these principles. And when I say stand on them, write them in their mission statement, say them out loud, they're great PR. I like to remind people that diversity and inclusion to me are like the 70s and jeans. Or the Jackson 5. It's a cute, very much trend. And I think it's going to go away because I think that, like Lily said when she first started, was that people are not actually taking action. And a lot of people assume that taking action is actually continuing to hire diverse talent. The issue with that is, number one, you're actually not hiring diverse talent because the numbers and the data doesn't lie. So you're still not even meeting the expectation and your definition of what diversity looks like on a platform that you have created the definition for. The second thing is I like to remind people is that as a marginalized person, we talk. So for example, I know every single person that does my job at every other company, regardless of race. And we are always talking. We are always connecting. We are always fellowshipping. And so companies are not doing enough about retention, because if you actually focus on retention and how you're treating the people inside the four walls of your building, then actually hiring would be a lot easier because we would tell people to come on over. And there's not enough conversation about retention because that actually is rooted in racism. So when you look at these companies and you see these diversity numbers, and I put that in quotes to say, where are all these numbers sitting? If people who are of a different race are at the bottom of the pyramid, and then white straight men are at the top, this is a literal racist system and a racist atmosphere. Because right now you are just pushing the agenda of saying we have these specific numbers, but we're not talking about how are we actually successfully promoting the careers of people who look different and feel different. And I think that's one of many ways how racism in 2020 is looking in our society, especially in tech companies, is that there's a lack of retention, there's a lack of mentorship, there's a lack of sponsorship, and then there are all these excuses to why a Black person or a Latinx person or an Indigenous person is not getting the director role or is not, as they say, doing their part, when in fact it is the white straight man who is getting the mentorship and the sponsorship behind the scenes in order to progress in their career successfully at whatever company they're at.
And really quickly to that, and I'd love to hear, and it looks like Lily has a comment. I literally spoke to a potential client yesterday who said, we're looking to have a recruiting audit. Do you do that? And I said, no, I can find you a specialist. I said, but are you looking at recruiting, retention, and upward mobility? You need to look at all three of them together, and they have to work collectively for the employee life cycle. And her response was, we're doing recruiting and we're looking at retention, but we didn't think about upward mobility. And it just blew my mind that, well, where do they go next? It should be up. And so it's a direct alignment to what you just said. It just happened yesterday. And Lily, I'd love to hear your feedback as well. Thank you, Lexi.
Yeah, I want to build on what's been said and add that racism in a lot of ways these days is more nefarious because racism looks like silence, right? Now we have, you know, white leaders asking for worksheets of 20 words that they can't say. They commit to not saying the 20 bad words and then think that they're doing good, right? And that's such a problem because I think as a society, we're very primed to view certain acts of racism as bigger than other ones. And so we hyper focus on people who use the wrong word, people who go on like expletive laden tirades, right? People who like make a fool of themselves. And that's all well and good, but we then assume that if you're not doing that, then you must not be racist. And what this framing does is it hides the systemic nature of racism. It means that we are less primed to think about racism in terms of the structure. We're less primed to think about racism in terms of the promotion rates, in terms of the hiring rates, in terms of representation at higher levels of leadership, in terms of belonging, culture, all of these things, because they're not as sexy in our minds, right? Like they don't jump out at us. And so nowadays, right, we are just very ready to say, if your CEO isn't saying horrible slurs, then your company's all right. And I think that is absolutely not the standard we should be holding companies to, right? We should be shifting the conversation away from very outright blatant racism to the more nefarious, impactful systemic racism that's embedded inside all of our companies, inside of our legal system, inside of our country, inside of our history, right? That's, I think, the real root of the problem we're facing. Not just that, you know, white supremacists are using slurs, which they are, but they're the tip of the iceberg, right? They are the symptom, not the cause.
Thank you so much. And Jared, unless you are super passionate, we'll go to the next one, but
Let's go.
You good?
Let's go to the next one.
Okay.
If I may, Dominique, I am.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
So I would uplift everything Lexi and Lily just said, and in addition, talk about internal to the workplace and then what companies are actually doing to create racism or enforce racial inequality outside of the workplace. So inside of the workplace, one of my best examples was actually at your employer, Lexi, when Leslie Miley, the only Black guy on the engineering team at Twitter, raises his hand in a staff all hands and asks, hey, what are we doing about diversity on the team? And his manager says, without batting an eye, well, diversity is important, but we're not going to lower the bar. So this assumption that the only folks who are qualified, the only folks who are have the right experience, who are intelligent and capable and all of these things, as white and Asian males. And even then with Asian males, they can do the work, but they can never advance to the highest levels within the company. Mm-hmm. And then white women being the police and kind of enforcing all of that, as well as sucking up to the white males so that we can advance as individuals and, quote, break the glass ceiling or lean in and advance in our careers. That's what's going on inside the workplace. And then externally, our companies are involved in racism as profit, you know, as the whole origin of profit in the United States is land theft, genocide, and exploitation of Black people. And that history has continued for 500 years up to present day. And so before COVID, median Black net wealth in our country was projected to be 0 by 2053. Latinx median net wealth projected to be 0 by 2073. And all these companies that are putting out these Black Lives Matter squares and saying, oh, we value Black life, are involved in creating and driving and profiting from that exploitation and that racial wealth gap. So I think it's not only what companies are doing on the inside, it's what are they doing on the outside? How are they treating their customers? How are they investing? How are they profiting from mass incarceration and all these other systems? That is, it can't just be about fixing the workplace. It has to be about fixing the entire operation of the company.
Thank you so much, Karen. And that is going to allow us to open the door to what does anti-racism look like in the modern workplace. And I would love some of the examples of companies that are doing it right. And I think we have a couple examples on the call, not to harp on one certain company, but what does it look like in the modern workplace?
I don't think it's easy to answer that question because I can't point to a workplace that is anti-racist.
That's what I was going to say, Karen and Dominique. It's not that this is my area of specialty or research around which companies are anti-racist, but I don't see any, to be totally candid, because it takes courage and it takes commitment and it takes intentionality and it takes fluency, racial fluency at the top levels, or if not that, then a receptivity to someone else, whether it's a consultant or other folks in the company to help them at least have a modicum of fluency. And people at the top levels who are running these companies, for the most part, just aren't that interested. So I don't want to be the doom and gloom, but that's why we're all doing this work. How do we get them to actually be interested on purpose, sustainably?
So, and I think that's fair, Karen and Jared, because we don't see what it looks like. We don't have examples. So then let's pivot slightly. What would it look like? What are we looking for? How will we know when it exists? Give us some signs of what that could look like, what we're trying to manifest.
I think it would look like these highly visible leaders, CEOs, C-suite folks, actually being vulnerable. So when they put out these statements, whether they're their own or the company's, they don't really say anything. You could just boilerplate stamp it to one company to the next. But what if someone came out and said, hey, I don't really, this isn't my area of expertise, but it's important, and I've made some mistakes, and here's what I'm learning, and here's who I'm talking to, and here's what I'm doing. Can you help me? And it was that kind of vibe, that would give the rest of the people in the organization that permission to be open about it. But instead, it's just easy to have an exec comms person write a well-crafted statement and then call it a day.
We call that checking the box. We call that checking the box. And you know what, Jared? I appreciate you wanting our leaders to be more empathetic. And while I love empathy, Lily and Alexandria hit me with some tangible, maybe non-empathy action items that we might need to look for.
I have so many opinions about this, but I'll make it quick. So I think anti-racism has two parts of it. The first part is first do no harm. And I have never met a single company that actually meets that goal, right? First do no harm. Ensure that your company does not perpetuate systems of racism, sexism, etc. in the world, right? Can you say that your company is not making the world worse? I don't have a single company that I know of that would meet that bar. Now, let's say you have met that bar, right? What does it mean to be anti-racist past that? It means to make an anti-racist world, right? An anti-racist company pushes toward an anti-racist world. By doing so, right, you commit as a company to dismantling systems of oppression, to advocating for marginalized communities, to actually making a difference in the world. I wrote about this in my recent piece about corporate social justice, this idea that companies need to be taking a bigger stand in actually protecting their employees. Because if you're anti-racist, you recognize that the world around you is racist, right? And so you can't really be an anti-racist company unless you recognize that the world is racist and commit to continuing onwards unless the world is no longer racist. Then you can truly call yourself an anti-racist company. One last thing I'm going to add, you're not anti-racist unless every white supremacist in the world hates your company, right? Have you taken such a strong stance on anti-racism that white supremacists hate your guts, refuse to associate with you, right? And if they don't hate your company, then maybe you should be pushing a little bit harder, right? The bar is not very high. Like, I can't believe I'm saying this, it's 2020, right? White supremacists should hate every single company, but they don't. And that's a problem, right? We need to get our companies to be pushing much, much harder and faster on these issues.
Wow. Go ahead, Lexi. I mean, she almost dropped the mic, but go ahead.
So I do want to preface this and say, I think these panelists in this call are phenomenal. I want to say for me specifically, I am the kind of person who's on the ground. So I'm not really looking at like systems, I'm looking at people. And I think that we need both to fix something. And anti-racist behavior is to have the people that are working with the system at large and have people on the ground. So as a person who likes to work with people on the ground, I have two major things: ERGs and middle management. And let me walk you through that. ERGs, what an anti-racist company looks like is they are not leaning on ERGs, which is free labor, to do their work for them. Because when
employee resource groups, right?
What you are telling me is the only reason why this ERG exists is to amplify your voice. And let me explain what happens. When we have people in ERGs doing the work, there's only 24 hours in a day. And many times there are research that shows this, that they are doing the ERG work. They're not actually doing the work that they are actually hired to do, and then therefore are receiving consequences because of that. So now we have a whole lot of marginalized people who are even more marginalized and can't even grow in their career that they're good at because they're too busy doing the work for the PR that you actually don't care about. That's the first thing. So I always tell companies, you need to have program managers or whatever title you want to call them actually running these ERGs. And if other people in the company that have other day jobs want to help out, phenomenal, fantastic. But that is a voluntary effort. And by putting marginalized people in a position where they have to do all of the work, and then the leaders of the company to create some kind of pose about it and have some PR stunt or some comms, I always tell people, as a straight person, when I look at Pride, I get so upset because Pride was founded on the pretense of Black and brown trans women. And yet in 2020, if it wasn't COVID, Pride would still be commercialized as a corporate entity, and people are dropping hundreds and thousands of dollars for a parade. But then as soon as July 1st hits, we don't have that money. So that's the ERG aspect of it, right? Middle management. And this is why I said in the beginning how I do not deal with systems necessarily, but deal with people. I think personally, there are a lot of leaders who want to do better. They don't know how to do better, which we have people like Lily and Dominique and Karen being paid, as they should, to be like, do better, be a better human, right? But really what comes down to it, when you talk to a lot of Black and brown people and people who are always the oppressed of racist behavior and sexist and discriminatory behavior, it is middle management. Because middle management does not actually have to do what the CEO said do. So you could literally have a leader of a company saying, we are going to be an anti-racist company. And we can have dynamic people like Lily and Dominique and Karen and Jared talking to them and making them understand that. But if there are no checks and balances for middle management, it does not come down into the portal. And I'm very passionate about that because me selfishly, when I look at my career, middle management has tried to stunt my career since I was 22 and first started. And I've worked at companies where there were times where I believed the CEO when they said, we need to work on this. And it didn't get done because of middle management. And I always tell people, if we want to really check this racist behavior and have an anti-racist company, there needs to be tools, process, and consequences for middle managers who are not in part of that agenda, because that's how Black and brown people are still being oppressed.
Drop the mic. I mean, no, it's actually a part of the model that I use for We360. People managers, if you touch a person as a part of your role, it is mandatory that you not only go through training, but that you are held accountable to ensure that you are amplifying the voices and the representation of people of color. It's a part of my model, and it is not enforced because profit is king. Companies focus on quarter-over-quarter profit. If they got to choose between their diversity number and hitting this goal, diversity goes to the wayside and they will do what they have always done, while also missing that incremental revenue you were fighting for, you probably could have doubled your numbers if you had the right talent in the room. So we need to look at what we're trying to have the profitability on the other side, which is the business case with diversity. That profitability is never realized if you do not properly put people in the positions where they have the insight and the experience for that work. Both Lexi and I had the same experience of being cast out of some career opportunities because we were too dynamic, but we are trained naturally to be that way. Now, I do have 4 questions, but in the interest of time, because I really want to get the audience or our learners to ask some questions, is really quickly, how are companies succeeding at anti-racism efforts? Now, because we just had the previous talk, let's not belabor that if we don't need to, but we will go to this one. As a white person, why is it in their self-interest to shift power in the workplace?
I'll take a crack at that. And I also want to weigh in just a little bit on the previous question.
Sure.
If we are to become an anti-racist company, that means we have to take our leadership from the most marginalized people in the workplace. And so Lexi and Lily need to get together and self-determine what our anti-racist company is going to look and feel like. And then everybody in the company comes underneath their leadership and supports and lifts them up in realizing what they're trying to achieve, right? It's not going to come from the white leaderships pushing down this anti-racist agenda. That's not how this works. It has to come from the most impacted people who are the closest to the problem and therefore closest to the solution. And we have to listen to them and follow their leadership. And they determine for themselves what it is that it should look like.
Yep.
Now, as a white person, why is it in my self-interest to basically let go of my power, let go of my position, my, my resources, my money, and get behind Lily and Lexi and uplift them? Is because first of all, what we have is currently wrong. It's immoral, it's unethical, and it is wrong, and we should not be involved in it. And Lily and Lexi are the leaders who are going to solve all of our greatest intractable problems. Again, they are the
How much are we getting paid to solve everything?
Yeah.
Yes, that's
Right.
a key. Right. That,
And
yes.
I'm not trying to burden
Black and brown people. Talk about that.
I'm not trying to burden them with solving those problems without the resources and the power to do it.
Right.
I'm saying that they are the ones who are closest to the solution, and they need the resources and the power that I can bring so that they can have the power to solve the problem. And that's how we're going to end climate change. That's how we're going to end gun violence. That's how we're going to end police brutality. That's how we're going to get a healthcare system that works for everybody, an education system that works for everybody. We have had this model of rich white people making all the decisions for 500 years. What do we have to show for it? We are a society in decline, okay? And unless and until we center the most intelligent, capable, best organizers, the folks who really understand how to get stuff done and follow their leadership, literally, we're all gonna die.
Yeah.
So to me, as I stated kind of in my intro, it's about humanity. When I grew up, I didn't see everyone's humanity. I saw a very limited perspective of humanity. And then when I started to wake up, I realized that I was missing that, and I've been, I don't want to say chasing after it, but aware of it for the last 20 years about the individual relationships and the collective humanity. So to answer this question, as a white person, which I am, why is it in my self-interest? We talk a lot about, which is super valid, the burden of responsibility and the burden of education on the people who are already marginalized to educate, to do the work, to, correct our mistakes, and that's all true and very true. There's also, for people who are white people who are actively combating and resisting and fighting and maintaining this power, the supremacy, that takes a lot of energy too. And I'm not equating them in any sort of justice way, but if we're talking about why is it in your self-interest, what if you could let go of all that nonsense? And if the argument is, well, I need to be in power because it's the business and profits and efficiency and productivity and innovation and all this stuff, how much are you actually losing yourself as a white person by holding people down, by maintaining the status quo, by maintaining a racist organization, and as others have pointed out, a society? So there's that side of things. And then the other side is just numbers. Like the demographics of the country are changing. I know, Karen, you've spoken and written a lot about this, right? It's not going to be this way. I'm not a data guy, so I don't know what all the numbers are, but I know in 20, 30, 40 years, it's not going to be majority white people. So if you're thinking, legacy, there's that motivation as well.
And we got a ton of questions coming through. I'm just going to say I'm not a white person, and I also do not have children, but I know a lot of human beings that want children. And if we don't work together now, your children's children will never get to see whatever future you want from them. And if you literally just look at climate change, the scientists say until we have equality, we'll never actually protect ourselves, because until our most marginalized communities are made whole, we are all subject to fail together. So think about the legacy of the families you're building. What future are you building for them? And will you be okay when they ask you, Mom and Dad, what did you do at this moment in history? Where were you at this moment in history? And what did you do about it? So just think about that. Now, because we have so many questions, I asked about behaviors that individuals can take to cultivate anti-racism, but I'm going to instead ask that you all do that as we answer some of the questions that are coming through in the Q&A. Is that okay for our panelists? Because I really think that this is important. So what I'm going to do, and Sam, feel free to hop in if I'm missing something. I'm going to start with the Q&A, and I'm just going to go down the list. And I'm going to ask for the most succinct response possible. And unless you feel like something was missed, please add it. Joshua asked, what about whites looking at fellow whites in the hiring views of supporting D&I? And I'm just going to pause there.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
The question says, what about whites looking at fellow whites in hiring in views of supporting diversity and inclusion?
And Dom, I'm happy you can give Joshua the floor for a second if you want.
Oh, yeah, perfect.
Joshua,
if you can unmute him, that way he can ask
okay
his
with
question.
that, just allowing you to talk now if you want to clarify.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, hi, Joshua.
Hi. No, so my question was, and background on me, I've been a job seeker in the Bay Area, and so, but I'm originally from Flint, Michigan, and I I've been very aware of racism all my life. Anyways, but in job interviews these days, by fellow white people, it's often they ask about supporting culture or supporting D&I as part of kind of almost the customary questions they might ask if it's a real woke company, so to speak. But often I find that the whites asking me questions about it know less about it than me and how to support it. And so when we're talking about anti-racism in corporate and in workplaces, there is some amount of division between white people and their knowledge that I don't know. I guess I wanted to kind of bring it up for discussion to say, how does that white on white view of the culture and what racism is, how does that play into things?
That's a great question, Joshua, and I don't have the answer, but and I don't want to turn this into a career coach kind of opportunity, but because you're talking about the job seeker side of things, but also the people on the hiring committee. So technically I still kind of am looking for jobs, although I've got a little bit more settled recently. I've found as a job seeker, if you feel competent, which it sounds like you're saying you feel confident and competent in your views on this topic, on anti-racism, come to that full force in your interviews and on your resume and your cover letters. And then it's up to the people on the other side. If they don't get it and they're like turned off, then maybe that's not the place you want to work. If they don't get it, but they're kind of impressed by you, then that's awesome. If they do get it, then that's doubly awesome. So it's kind of, it comes back to kind of what I was saying, a little bit earlier in the panel around like, how well does each one of us know our own story and purpose around this work? So a lot of the work I do is helping people on the other side, the TA people, the recruiters, the hiring managers. How can you be better so you can start looking at this and center it and be aware of its value as you're looking at potential candidates? So I could probably say more, but I'll stop there and let others chime in.
I've got a one-sentence response to that. If your recruiters are talking about DE&I being important, but don't know enough about D&I to ask those questions, your company hasn't done a good enough job. Ensure those recruiters are trained. That's their problem. That's your company's problem.
And I think that's fair because the interview process is two ways. You're evaluating them just like they're evaluating you. And in that moment, you are showing them what you know and what you're aware of. And like Jared said, that conversation is going to pan out the way that it should for either you or that candidate. But thank you for that question, Joshua. I hope that answered your question. Okay. Jan Porter, if you are there, and Sam, can we unmute Jan Porter if she's around, and then I can ask her question? Or maybe I'm going to ask, and if we need clarification, she can chime in.
I just gave her talking ability.
Perfect. All right, Jan, let's hear it.
Hey there. I was really struck by the ideas about holding managers accountable and not just talking at anti-racist from the highest levels. And I would just love some examples of what those metrics are. What are people held accountable to in their performance reviews quarterly or annually?
I would love to answer that question for you, Jen. So there are many, many examples of this, but I think one of the best ones and one of the easiest ones is the actual performance review. You don't know how many times in an actual performance review conversation where, let's just take race out of it for 2 seconds, where everyone is confused about the words on paper versus how that actually connects to their job and their leveling and if they're getting promoted and their money. So if that's everyone, imagine for a Black and brown person. And I always tell people, because I do a lot of coaching, one-on-one coaching with middle management, and I always tell them I cannot speak for the whole Black community. The diaspora is large and great, but I can speak for myself. And I need a middle manager. I need a manager, especially as I get higher in my career, that when I say, what are the 3 things I need to do to be in a position to be talked about for a promotion, they are very direct, they are very candid, and there are actionable items behind that. You don't know how many times, Jen, where I've been in conversations about my review, and usually reviews high level are like, here are your strengths, areas of opportunity, and then what you're going to work on the next cycle, where in the areas of opportunity, there are no areas for me to work on, but yet I'm not getting promoted.
Yes.
And then when I ask, well, how does that actually work? The response is very nice, in a nice sounding tone. And they say things like, well, it just takes time. Keep doing what you're doing. That's racist. Because what you're telling me is you're not actually giving me the actionable items for me to be great. So you're not telling me where the finish line is. You're just making stuff up. And I know that we don't have a lot of time, but that's just one clear example. So any middle managers on the call, I don't care who you are managing, but especially when it comes to marginalized people, when we ask, what do I need to do to make it to the next level? You need to have clear and concise things that you need to do, and we need to check on them. Do not be the manager that doesn't tell me anything, and then I get to my review and you have all of these feedback loops, because then we're going to have a problem because you had the last 6 months to figure this out and you refuse to acknowledge it and give me an opportunity to change my behavior. And so if I'm doing everything you say that I'm supposed to do, and we have our checkups and all that, and everything's great, then my review should not be a surprise, 1. And then number 2, my review should end up in a promotion / because promotions are not just on the middle manager, and we all know that. I need to know that you fought like hell to get it. That's what needs to happen.
She's absolutely correct. And if any other panelists have a response to that, that would be great. My quick comment, Jim, would be if they are on your team, then their goals are your goals. My white woman manager, when I explicitly had the uncomfortable conversation of telling her why I felt like I was fighting against her rather than working with her, was that I had goals that that weren't aligned to her. So why am I on your team if my goals don't align? Through that conversation, she acknowledged her bias by nature of the work that I do. Had it been anybody else, I would have felt sorry for them. I don't know how they would have navigated the conversation. She absorbed my goals with me. It became clear, and she went to VP meetings with me. She became my biggest advocate. She opened doors for me. It became evident that I could get my job done because she was there. So if you have people on your team, their accomplishments should be a reflection of yours. And if you are distant from their goals, that's a whole nother operative issue, but they should be as accountable to that bottom line as you are. And they should be clear along the way. Because just like some people like checking boxes, we want to know we're getting the work done, and we don't want to chase our tails trying to do it.
I would also add that middle managers set the behavioral tone for the entire team. So if you're microaggressing and you're doing harmful behaviors, everybody else on the team is going to do that too. Or if folks on the team are doing harmful behaviors and you as the manager aren't checking them, you're giving them license to do that. So it's on you to understand what workplace microaggressions are, to intervene when you see it happening. And I also encourage middle managers to meet with the most marginalized people on their team individually and say, you know what, your experience here is extremely important to me. What can I do to have your back? How is it going here? Are there any problems that I should be on the look for? If you experience anything, you come straight to me. I have your back. And to develop that kind of rapport, and to treat everybody as individuals and not as representatives of their entire group. Understand that people have different leadership styles. People have different ways that they contribute. And don't turn to someone and say, oh, can you speak on XYZ group to contribute that perspective? No, just as you would with anybody else. What's your thought on this? As you would anyone else, not speak on behalf of whatever group, those types of things.
To end this very quickly, I'm sorry, I have one more comment, is that I do want to make it clear to the room that 99% of the time people leave managers, not companies. I can only speak for my specific career track. Every company that I have left, it has been because of a manager. The current job I have at my current company, I went because of a manager. I was literally in conversations in November and I said, I will come and work for you because I do believe the manager that I have is brilliant and she supports me and she elevates me and I feel safe and I feel worthy and I feel like everything as far as my negotiation all the way up to what I'm working on is not only what I want to do, but also what I deserve. People leave managers, not companies. And I think all people need to understand that.
That is incredibly, incredibly valid, and you are absolutely correct. And we have a couple more questions before we transition to two other notes. First of all, we have like 20 questions. I feel both excited and saddened because now we have to have another event just to answer the questions. But I do want to hop through and see if we can get a couple more answered. And I'm skipping through because I'm trying to choose a question that a ton of you can benefit from. So my apologies. And I'll work with Sam to see if maybe we can answer these questions and maybe send it to you afterwards in an effort to get you this information. So one thing that I'm seeing that's huge is how can workplaces balance amplifying people of color voices, particularly Black people of color voices, and following their leadership without burdening them or forcing them to do it within a white comfort space? So how do you support them without overwhelming them? Lily?
So I literally just wrote a piece on this, which is why I jumped to answer this one.
Feel free to chat in the thing. We want to read your piece. I saw you in the HBR.
Sure. This is a slightly different one than the most recent HBR one, but here I just linked it. Step 2 of this article that I listed basically addresses this exact challenge, right? Because employee resource groups are tasked with doing too much, right? They're tasked with free labor. They're tasked to basically do DE&I for their companies. On the other hand, if you don't rely on people of color to make decisions, then your decisions are going to be super white, right? And that's going to be problematic. So one of the answers that I've seen piloted is creating a working group or a cross-functional team with representation of your POC leaders inside the company that exists on top of DE&I work that's already happening. And so what this sort of cross-functional group does is, because it is an explicit structure, because it is an explicit part of people's jobs, they can be compensated for it. They can have that considered as part of their performance review. They can basically opt in and opt out to that. If it's entry level, you can pay people extra for it. But what this sort of cross-functional group can do is it formalizes the role of BIPOC, Black and Indigenous people of color, for example, leading this sort of work and getting compensated for their labor, right? And this is such an interesting challenge, because everything that the industry's done so far hasn't really been working, right? Either they've leaned too far on basically exploiting employee resource groups and basically getting free labor, or they've leaned too far the other way and just hire one chief of diversity and task them with doing everything, right? And we need a structural approach, right? We need a design approach that sits in that middle ground where POC are empowered, have resources, have decision-making ability, and are also not doing this work for free, right? And I think this is one model that I think could work. Another one that could work is just hire a D&I team that's like 20 people, right? Like, do away with your 2 or 3 person D&I team and just hire a bunch of Black and Indigenous people of color to lead your D&I team. That would be awesome. Most companies are probably not going to do that. So the approach,
fund them. Don't hire them without a budget. Let's be clear. Don't hire them without a budget.
Right? Or let's go one step better, right? Get senior executive leadership and hire Black and Indigenous people of color into higher leadership positions. Like, let's just increase your representation, fix everything, right? And then this isn't a problem. But anyways, before we get there, right, we can think about nifty solutions that design around these sorts of challenges. This is one option that I've seen work in limited capacity that I really, really want to experiment with. So I'm actually working with a couple clients to build something similar to this. I'll keep folks updated if it seems like it's working out.
And also to the point, when you hire this amazing Black and Indigenous diversity, equity, and inclusion team, right? Make sure they have the power to make decisions and actually make change, because there's a whole lot of companies that have these very massive teams because they have budget to hire them. And then when you actually look under the hood, people are not supported and have the power to actually make change. So now we just have 20 Black and brown people sitting there with these very amazing titles who are not actually moving the bar towards an anti-racist organization because they are not empowered to do so.
No, and in fact, they've been tokenized because they have been, and that was me, believing I was on the freedom fight, and then I looked around and the data-driven person I am, the output was not there. And then you feel the shame of your community, and then that weight comes back, and then there's resentment, and it's multiplicative. So if you're going to take these steps, avoid the check the box. Do not look at what action can I do today. Look at the outcome I want tomorrow.
And make your DEI team report to the CEO, not to HR, please.
Exactly. To the CEO. Yes.
Exactly. Reporting to the CEO, and the board of directors should be responsible for making sure they hire a CEO that understands that, because the board of directors' responsibility is to ensure maximum profitability for your shareholders. If the business case for diversity is that you hire diverse people, but you are not making sure that it is integrated throughout the entire company, then you have hired the wrong CEO who is stunting your profitability. So if you really want to look at it from a monetization standpoint, by not investing in DEI, the $8 billion for this industry that we are wasting could be reallocated into the profitability of each and every one of these companies. That's what we want you all to take away from. We don't want you to check the box. Actually, we can do that ourselves without you, but it leaves none of us well-fed, and it leaves us in competition with other nations that are waiting for our collapse because of this very moment. We don't have the luxury of waiting anymore. One more question before we pivot. We've got a lot of them. Hold on. somebody asked, and it was powerful, Conrad Moore, and I know I probably should have went to the bottom, but they said, and Conrad, if you're here, I'd love to have you unmuted and maybe you can ask. Sam, if you see him.
Yes.
I'm here.
Perfect. I loved your word choice. I think you were quoting Miss Audre Lorde.
That's right.
All right, now let's hear it.
Yeah, so I came to the corporate world only in the last 5 years. I started in education, so I learned a lot of this stuff in a very different context. And I guess my question is it really possible, or do you believe it's possible for this work to be successful inside hierarchical structures that to me are reflecting the larger structures of our society, and that is patriarchy and racial capitalism?
I think that is the question.
Wait, no, Lexi, what you say? And then Karen. Lexi said no.
Which is why I said from the beginning, that's why I work on the ground, individualized and not in the system. I think the system over time can do a little bit better, but I think that our working environment is just a microcosm of our actual whole society. So I agree with Audre Lorde basically on everything she says, usually. But in this specific situation, the master's tools cannot help the master's house, right? And so for me as a freedom fighter, I always say, okay, so, but what can I do in the master's house? And I can just start a revolution with these people in this house and say, be better humans. And how are we gonna figure this out? How are we gonna make this money? And we use the money to fund the dreams of what you actually want to do. Because I also think that part of colonization and patriarchy and enslavement is the fact that a lot of Black and brown people have never had an opportunity to actually dream about what they want to do. And people in tech don't discuss enough about that. A lot of people in tech, when you actually give them an opportunity to think about what do you want to be when you grow up, they're not doing what they want to do. They're doing what the patriarchal system of a dream said, a White House and a picket fence and 2.5 kids and 3/4 of a dog. And that's fine. But I think it's important to use what we have in the house for right now to put yourself in a position to say, what resources can you take away from this to help the community that you're freedom fighting for, and to build the dream that you actually want in the first place.
Thank you.
Look at that. That was fast. Now, I know there's several other questions. I want to hear any other panelists have a question about, and I heard from Lexi, and I'd love to hear an alternative perspective. Maybe Karen, what does that look like?
Well, I think that's exactly right. You know, I always come back to Audre Lorde's essay, Age, Race, Sex, and Class, where she says our greatest problem is that we have no patterns of relating across difference as equals. We only know how to relate in hierarchy and on the good, bad binary. So it's good to be white, it's bad to be Black, it's good to be a man, it's bad to be a woman, all of this stuff. And so because we don't have any patterns of what it actually looks like to not be in hierarchy, we're all kind of groping around trying to figure that out. And that's what I really consider my life's work, is trying to teach people how to relate across difference as equals, how to lay down the master's tools and start building real trust and relationship across difference. The patriarchy has done such a fantastic job of amassing great wealth and power by convincing everybody outside of it to hate ourselves and to hate each other and to fear each other. And we have to teach ourselves to love ourselves and to not fear each other, and to reach across difference and see the difference, recognize the difference, and build trust and community. And that's how we're going to dismantle the master's house.
Thank you so much, Karen. And we're going to transition to the close. This has been phenomenal. This has opened the door to so many other conversations, and I want to help you all point each other in the right direction. In order to do that successfully, I'm going to ask each of our panelists, what's one key takeaway you want leaders to leave with today? And what is your commitment to creating an anti-racist workplace? Short and sweet, because I want all four of you to say, what do you want everyone who's listening today to know? And what is your commitment to creating an anti-racist workplace?
I'll go first.
All right, Jared.
This is especially for white leaders, but I think it applies to everyone. Recognize that your story of racism and therefore anti-racism may actually seem like a non-story. So what I mean by that is, what? I'm just normal. I didn't have any issues with race growing up, or no stories. That's the story. The times when you didn't have any black friends in high school. The times like me when you played on a sports team of 35 guys and 33 of them were white. Those weren't stories when I was in them, but looking back, those are the stories. So when especially white folks who've been living this life of privilege and unawareness, that's what you have to start. When you're not understanding what all the fuss is, and you think it's just current because George Floyd was murdered, you have to do that self-reflection. So that's my commitment, is to do that myself, or to keep doing that, and to help others start to realize that the story is actually what they might be thinking is the non-story.
Thank you, Jared. Karen or Lily?
Fine. Let's see. So one key takeaway, I would say that the winds are changing. People want more, right? People want you to do so much more, and it's now okay for you to do more. Yeah, you can say your company is anti-racist. Yeah, you can say that white supremacy is bad. Yeah, you can take a stand on big social issues of racism, sexism, inequality, injustice. You can say those things. It's okay now. Like, the only people who are going to hate you are white supremacists, and that's good, right? So make a damn statement, and don't be afraid to go bold, because that's the direction our country is moving in, right? We have enormous opportunity right now. So please, 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 if there's one thing you take away, right, go bold, go big, say the things that are hard to say, and you'll find that more people support you than you think. My commitment, I'm committed to doing the work to make better systems while recognizing that this work is damn hard. And most people have no idea what the heck they're doing, including us, right? The research is changing every single day on what the best ways to actually create a better workplace, a better system, a better world is, right? This isn't work that you just listen to a consultant talk to for an hour and know how to do perfectly, right? All of us here are in process. All of us here mess up just as often as we do good. And that's just a reality of this work, right? So I'm committing to messing up more, to doing better, to learning more, to building my skills and building my ability to make change, and just doing my best and making a network of folks who are also doing their best to make a better world.
Thank you. Oh my gosh, this is why we're friends. Now we got Karen and Lexi.
I would love for Lexi to go last, actually, because I want to hear. I think she'll be able to close.
That's how I end most of my events with
Go
Lexi.
before me. Go ahead.
I think for me, it is the key takeaway that I want leaders to figure out, to leave with today is, one, it is always the right time to do right. Period. It is always the right time to do right. So I don't know what you did in your past, but today, on July 9th, 2020, you have the opportunity to just do the right thing. And one of those actionable right things are, right now, companies are, because of society and because of what's going on, companies are giving budget to have these conversations and to bring in consultants, hire Black women to do that work, pay them fairly. That's what I would say. And then the commitment to creating an anti-racist workplace, I've already started, which is Sister Circle Black Women in Tech. When I started it 3 years ago, that was my commitment, to create an anti-racist, not only workplace, but an environment, to create a safe space for a group of people, Black women, who don't have that safe space, and to partner with tech companies and be able to call them out on what is wrong and have these very deep conversations with them about how to make it right and how this organization can help them push it forward. And that's a commitment that I will stand by until I die. So yeah.
Thank you. And then Karen.
So this time period reminds me of the last 10 years before the Civil War, when the slave owners could feel the system starting to dissolve underneath them and the political will of the country start to shift. And so they were doing everything they could to grasp onto power and to, you know, the Fugitive Slave Act, the Dred Scott decision, just getting more and more extreme. And the abolitionists just stayed the course. They were like, we're just gonna keep believing, even in the face of all of this terrible adversity. And I have drawn so much courage seeing the Black young people with the megaphones out on the street leading these protests. So when you feel like, oh my God, I'm so overwhelmed and everything is a terrible mess and I'm so depressed, I want you to tap into that level of courage, that level of anger. We should all feel that. And to my white women, we have more power. We made up 42% of the electorate in 2016. More than white men. White men only made up 33% of the electorate, okay? We're the reason white women who voted for Trump deciding to vote for Democrats in 2018 is how we took back the House of Representatives. Yesterday was the 2-year anniversary of when Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh, or today is the 2-year anniversary of when Trump nominated Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. Yesterday, he issued the decision saying employers can refuse to grant birth control. Okay, I want to see every white woman push it to the limit. If we want more for ourselves, if we want safety and freedom for ourselves and for our kids, we have to get behind the leadership of women of color. And every single protection from workplace discrimination that we have was fought for by Black people. They gave their lives for that movement. We owe everything we have to them, and we need to be behind their leadership and fight alongside themselves, because they're fighting for their liberation, but our liberation is bound up in theirs.
Thank you so much, Karen, and to all of our panelists. And as a moderator and someone who is also in this work, one key takeaway that I want for everyone today, in the words of the Hamilton play, history has its eyes on you. And what side of history are you on? When we have to determine what story we're going to tell our children 50, 100 years from now, when they write the history books, were you the one on the side fighting for the justice for everyone? Were you fighting for justice and equality for all, or just a few? Because just because it isn't you today doesn't mean your time isn't coming. The history of this nation is about to shift. That does not mean we're going to be to the majority population what the majority was to us. But it does mean that we will need to collaborate in a way that's never been done before. Who are you in this walk? Because I only want to work with the best of you, and I'm willing to work with your messy, but I need you to show up and show out. You can't lead a team and you can't lead a household if you can't first lead yourself. That's what I need from you. My commitment to this work is that I am a bridge builder. I have been told not to have certain conversations with certain people. I have been policed on how I'm showing up, and I'm going to authentically be me. If you are willing to have the conversation, if you give me a space to affect change, that's what I'm going to do. And I'm willing to have that conversation. In support of this, I ask that you all connect with every panelist we had today. Find them on LinkedIn. If you want to work with them, but now is the time. If you need directions on who to reach out to because you're reaching out to us and you're not really sure where to start, we can help point you in that direction. But we are the ones that are here inspiring you to be the best version of you. We cannot do this alone. I need 330 million of us, the population of the US, to be fighting for one, for liberty and justice for all, not for few. And I don't say that to be on a soapbox. I actually believe that. So with that said, I want the commitment from you. Please, what are you all committing to? What is your one commitment this week? And make it bold. Don't tiptoe into these commitments. I'd love for you all to put in the chat box what are you all looking to do? And without further ado, as you all tell us your commitment, Sam, I'd love for you to come back in and help close us out. I think this has been fantastic. And I'm looking out for you all's commitments while Sam takes us through how we're gonna further that commitment through home.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dom. And thank you to all the panelists. What an incredible conversation, just real and engaging and thoughtful. Thank you all so much. And for all the members here who have asked questions and engaged, thank you, thank you, thank you. My commitment is to continue to show up to these conversations with curiosity. I'm here to learn. I'm not here for others to teach me. I need to do that on my own. But I am here to also show up and learn as part of that. And for Hone, and just feel inspired by this, but our commitment at Hone is to continue to amplify the voices of those who need to be heard on these topics, who can educate and who can teach our communities. All the panel here, Dom, just have done a fantastic job with that. So within that offer of amplification, as part of our membership through Hone, as part of your membership, if you're interested, we're offering free enrollment to our 15 plus upcoming classes, all 60 to 90 minutes over the next month. Again, the purpose of Hone is to amplify voices and help you connect in an easy, accessible way to really meaningful and powerful content. Here are some of the upcoming workshops and classes that we're offering. Dom is teaching the dangers of a culture of conformity. It's happening on July 16th at 1 p.m. Lanre, a fantastic facilitator and coach of ours in the UK, is teaching a course on address microaggressions on your team. We have a follow-up on embracing diversity with inclusion. And then we have Alyssa leading a session called Lessons Learned, Coaching Top Leaders Through Crisis. So we have a D&I curriculum, but we also have a lot of other leadership and management courses. If you're interested in enrolling in that free membership the next month, I'm just going to put the link in here. I'm not going to oversell it. If you're interested, feel free to check it out. It's honehq.com/membership. I'll put it one more time just in the chat here. Feel free to go and sign up, and really look forward to having you in upcoming classes. And thank you again so much for joining today. And thanks so much to the panel. Dom, and anything you want to add before we close?
Yeah, just really quickly. I just want to say, you know, I know this isn't like a pat on the back thing, but thank you for showing up. Thank you for the people that took time out of your day to say, I'm ready to start the conversation. I don't really know what I don't know, but I'm willing to figure it out, because we need that space. Wherever you are in your journey, there is somebody who's there with you, and you are not alone. Ignorance is not bliss. There is no safety in not knowing. Now is the time to allow yourself to be self-educated and to get ready to be messy. And if you are not willing to experience a loss, then you are not ready. You are going to lose friends. You might lose relationships. You might lose a piece of yourself that you formerly thought. That's a part of allyship. You have to be prepared to experience some of the losses we have. On a positive note, we're excited to do this with you. If you are someone looking to do this work at your company and you want to do it with folks who can help you, Diversity Advocates is a program through the K4 Center, and they are specifically focused on Black and Latinx community and the indigenous community. And they had an event today specifically focused on getting people like you together. If you're actually trying to do this work, look at the K4 Center, or you can reach out to me. I'm just trying to make sure you all are talking to each other so this work continues after today. I'm so excited to continue this work. I look forward to seeing you all. Membership is free, so let's get started. Have a fantastic start to your weekend. Happy Friday Eve. Thank you to our panelists. Hi, everyone.
Hey, all. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Are we wrapping up, or is that it? I guess everyone's dropped off.
Time for the second talk. If everyone's still here.
Thank you all.
I can get my
I'll
guitar.
Oh yeah, that'll be fun.
All
I need to
right.
turn on my AC. It's way too hot in here. I was trying to take this off like halfway through, and then I was like, that would be really distracting. So I'm just gonna leave it on.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thanks all. I'll follow up via email. Really appreciate it. You guys are
Okay.
amazing.
All right. Thanks.
Yeah,
Sam.
yeah.
Bye,
Take care,
Lily.
y'all.
Yep.
Sign off, y'all. Bye.